since it's a warm up, do you want to just explain financial literacy, what it means, and why does it matter?
Sure. So, financial literacy as a whole is just basically making sure that you understand how your money works and how it's going to matter for you, and making a plan for that future so that you're not, you know, I mean, time goes really fast. And then 10 years down the road, you wake up and you're like, oh man, like I've just been doing the same thing for the last 10 years and calling it life. Whereas if you had a plan for your financial future, you could say, I made this much money this week. Let's put $200 into a high yield savings account so that it's going to grow and then it's going to stay there for a while. And then when you need it, it's there and you can use it. And you don't have to rely on a credit card or borrowing money or asking your stepdad for another loan again,
Yeah.
having somebody bail you out. Uh, so I think the bottom lines for being financially literate or learning how to have an emergency fund, how to build that, paying yourself first. That's a big one. Building the habits that are going to support you later on in life. Planning for retirement, whether that means talking to a financial professional and asking all the right questions, like what is this going to do for me? What are the fees I'm paying? What am I going to get for those fees? Like whereas you know that we don't charge, but a lot of professionals do charge, and so you want to make sure you know what you're getting for that if you go talk to one of them. And then if you have any kind of debt, because a lot of people in the US have a lot of debt right now. Um, Credit cards are pretty much thrown at us. If we have any kind of good score, they're like, "Here, have another one. Here, have another one."
That's interesting. Like, I had like it's really hard to even get a credit card here.
Really?
Whereas you have to show that you can actually earn a certain amount and you can actually pay it off. They're not giving them out. And even somebody I know who's got a really high value credit card, he wanted to get it switched over to a different one. So he would actually use it. So you get rewards points on it. And they said, no, they're not going to change it. And he's like, I'm asking you to change the card so I'll actually use it. And you've said no.
That's weird.
Yeah, there's so many. It's so strange here because even getting loans or anything like that, you have to go through these automated systems. And like before, you used to be able to speak to somebody and they can play with the numbers a little bit here and there and kind of get you through the door to get you a loan of a certain amount.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can't do that because even the people in the banks here are tied by whatever automated system we all have access to as customers. So yeah, there are no strings that can be pulled or anything. They have really, really clamped down with stuff like that in banks here. And I don't know if it's the regulations here or what it is, or if it's just as a culture here, they don't like get into the debt culture because you can go out and get a loan to go on holiday. I find that insane. Why would you take a loan out to go on a holiday? I
Yeah,
would just, yeah, it's crazy, but people do. And
because you have 10 times harder when you get back.
exactly, that's what I thought, right? But I guess some people would want to do that once a year and then just slowly pay it off. I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just for me, I just find that really bizarre because I grew up in a you don't work, you don't eat kind of hustle, that kind of lifestyle. So for me, all of this stuff is so new. It's completely different here. And I am probably going to do some research and try and find out why, because I'm not sure if it's a legislation telling the banks to do that or if it's the banks have done that for whatever reason. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so different. It's like comparing the states.
It's fascinating because I don't know if it's like a one extreme to the other, if one's better or one's worse. I think there's probably a fine line somewhere there, but yeah, America is like built on debt, really. Making sure that people stay in a debt so that they're easier to control. They'll keep working and they won't be able to get out of that. So yeah, but bottom line is learning how to use credit cards and restraint and saying no. And my education when I was young was that credit cards were bad and that I should stay away from them forever. But they're really just tools. And the ones that you should really look at if someone's on to go get one is having one that does give them benefits, like you were talking about, flyer benefits, cashback, I don't know, whatever that looks like for them that they want. But I prefer, I personally prefer the flyer miles because I like traveling, but making sure that they don't have annual fees. If you're going to start one, I would get a very low, like $400 max, and then don't max that out. Just use like 30% of it, no matter what, and then pay it off every month. I would not pay for something and then go right around and turn around and pay it off because it still has to have time to hit the banks and say, "Oh, yes, look, you've paid this," or "Yes, you've charged it." So every month, once a month, I would nominate a day that, you find is okay to
Yeah.
pay back off and say, "Okay, I'm not gonna use more than this." But that's the way you build your credit, and it's fantastic. Because credit scores are um, interesting, but they're basically built on debt. You have to stay in debt to get a credit score, but you can't be over in debt and you can't not pay it back. Otherwise it goes down. So you have to make sure you kind of play that game. But, yeah, I love teaching people how to do that because it is a game. Life's a game. Money is just a game.
Really interesting as well because, like, we don't learn this in school. Why don't we learn this in school? Why isn't this taught to us? Why, like, there's that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it
Mhm.
teaches you like the difference between assets and liabilities. And I think it's really important for people to understand. Like, for instance, a car is not an asset.
Right.
What is, well, a car is what they call a depreciating asset, but I've never viewed it as an asset because anything that depreciates is not an asset as far as my language is concerned. I've always had a bit of a bone to pick with the financial industry for calling a car a depreciating asset.
They are
But
they're
but
useful.
yeah,
They're tools. We need them. But yeah, I don't know.
yeah, they're depreciating, and I always looked at it as anything that depreciates is is a liability. And I think even understanding things like the difference between assets and liabilities and understanding what works and how you can get your money to work for you. Because a lot of people don't know how to do that. And that is what that's what the rich people do. Wealthy people stay wealthy because they are money smart. And it's not taught to everybody and it's not widespread as to why it's not. I mean, the conspiracy is that it keeps the masses at bay and it keeps everybody kind of it keeps the 1% in the 1% kind of thing. I don't think it's as deep as that. I literally just think it's because we just don't teach financial literacy in school. And if we
Mhm.
taught financial literacy in school, then we'd probably have people making smarter decisions. However, um, I think the upcoming generation is a lot smarter with money. They're a lot more clued in. I think even with millennials, I could say we we did chores in exchange for money. So I knew if I did extra chores or extra things that I could make extra pocket change if I wanted something. And that really taught me to work for money. I remember my grandparents saying that, yeah, I should do the chores without getting paid for it. And it's a chore. It's a couple of bucks. So it's not,
Yeah.
we're not draining the bank here. But what you're doing is you're teaching a child how to work for their money. It's kind of down to the parents to kind of teach that. And if you
Mhm.
weren't taught, then you're not going to teach your child because you weren't taught. So, and it just kind of passes down. It's like manners. You learn your manners at home. You don't go to school and learn your pleases and thank yous. That's something that you're supposed to learn at home. But now a teacher is saying that with parents being so busy, they don't have the time to teach their kids like proper table manners. If it was drilled into the parents to teach their
Mhm.
kids financial literacy,
Right.
then or if you thought that, you'd remember to teach that and pass that information on, but it isn't.
Right.
Do you have any idea why?
Well, I mean, I think that it goes back to the generations before us that nobody taught them. And for a long time, I blamed my parents for not teaching me, but then I realized somebody said that you can't blame your parents for something they didn't know. And I mean, if you think about it, their parents lived through the Great Depression and money was not a thing. Either you were super rich and you moved to Mexico, or you were poor and you lived with like 12 other families in the same dirt hole. And then before that, money was an entirely different thing. I mean, we had World War One, we had World War Two, we had the Great Depression, we had Civil War. Like this country was not founded that longer ago. And I mean, overseas, like where you are, I can't speak for that because I've never been there. But at the same time, like I'm sure they didn't know either. Money was the last 100 years of money has been such a different thing than it is now.
I would agree with that. I would even say the last 50 years. money has changed. And I think a lot of that has to do with technology, because technology boomed and so did some form of financial equality. It gave the average person something more, and it taught, and it I think because I look at this through like even having small businesses and the number of people that now want a business, right?
Mhm.
And we look at like the gig economy, and more people, uh, they're starting to cotton on to the fact that employment isn't secure anymore.
Right.
So wanting to control their finances, and they want to, take control of their financial future, which is absolutely their prerogative. But so many people don't understand what it takes to actually start and run a business and keep a business alive, because they think, well, working all day, so how hard can running a business be? But what they tend to forget is that for the company that you're working for, you then will have to do the job of everybody in that company. Every role that's in that company, you're going to have to go and do exactly that. And it's just
And it
you.
takes years. Right.
It takes a
Long
lot of
haul.
money as well. And so I understand it from the point of looking at how many people now have businesses, how many people want that financial freedom, how many people need extra money. They need a side hustle because people can't make ends meet right now. And I struggle a little bit because we've been through the Great Depression. We've been through all of these horrific, financial events where, we were in serious, serious recessions, and we seem to have come out of it unscathed almost. But it seems that right now, is it that we're in a culture of we're spending way more, and we want to spend more because we have more access to things. We have more access to things like Klarna, so we can pay and buy something and pay it off in installments, and get these loans with these high APRs, these small loans, but you're paying like 80% APR on it. Like, we have better access to that.
Yes, absolutely. That's why. I mean, if you think about it, back in the day, I mean, even 50 years ago, like you said, people had to work for their money. They had to go to work every day, work 40 hours a week. That was pretty much the norm. And then they get a paycheck. And back then, one man could support his whole family on one job, and a woman stayed home. And that was the tradition. But now, women go to work, men go to work, women run businesses, our rights have changed even. So credit cards and the fact that it's so easy to access things, and the fact that we make more kind of programs their minds to be like, I can afford that. I don't need to look at my budget. I have money today. So who cares about tomorrow? Um, and also, like you said, Klarna and credit cards and loans that are getting easier in the US. Like I'm kind of glad that overseas it's harder to get loans, but I mean here especially, like I'll just put it on the card and pay it off later. And then you think you're delusioning yourself to make it tomorrow's problem. Make it, and that's just become a habit. I used to do that all the time. I used to be like, I'll worry about that tomorrow. And then that was future me's problem. But future me wasn't some super person that like had everything handled tomorrow. I was still the same me. I just had a bigger problem because I didn't do it yesterday.
Oh,
And I feel like a lot of people think that way. And I mean, I think that just we've cycled into such a thing where we're I don't sometimes it is when I look at people's finances and I say, okay, sometimes it is saying you need to make more money. You're living bare minimum. You don't make enough money for what you're doing right now. But sometimes it is you spend way too much money and you need to like maybe cut back and then think about your priorities so that you could say, I do want to retire one day. I do want to set up money for my kids. I do want to take care of them if something happens to me. And then put your money where it's going to matter most. So, I mean, budget is a huge, huge thing. And I was thinking while we were talking, we can talk about this later too, but what if we had a different topic for every other week? Because I was going to say maybe different topics about concepts like the rich dad, poor dad, and assets and liabilities. What are those? Compound interest. How does it work for and against you?
yeah.
History of money. Like, where did it come from? Like, how do we even get here?
Salt used to be currency, and salt used to be
Right.
expensive as well. Yeah. It's like when we think about, we used to barter things, right? So
Mhm.
when you live in a village, and I was talking about like communities and villages earlier as well. But when we used to live in a village, we used to help each other. So if I sewed clothes and I don't know, the guy across the street was a butcher, right? I would sew his kids' clothes and he'd give me a piece of meat. Like we used to barter with stuff like that. It never actually had to be like a cash exchange. And now it's no longer how it used to be because now we no longer live in villages. Now we just live in big cities and a global economy and access to services like these, for instance. Like I'm so grateful for stuff like this because it allows like you and I to connect. Otherwise, 100 years ago, this would have never happened. We would have only met if one of us had decided to brave the great seas and go on a ship somewhere, you know? You look at society as a whole, completely different. But then we
Mhm.
survived then. So like, what are we what are we doing now? Is it just consumerism gotten to a point where we just want more and more and more? And how different is that is that based on greed? Or is that just because we're chronically stressed and we just need dopamine all the time?
I think it's a mix. I think it's a combination between those. And I don't, we've never seen this before. If we think about it, really, if we're thinking about this term, but we've never seen this much money accessible, and we've never seen this much like consumerism, but we've never had this much access to like travel or work. I mean, we've never worked this much. We've never been on demand 24 hours a day. This, like, never. Like, our bodies, our minds were not built for people having access to us all the time.
Yeah.
Um, I think you're right. I mean, it is chronic stress to some. And I think we've taken a step back from not everybody, obviously, but as a whole, we've taken a step back from what really matters. And I think people are starting to wake up. I think people are starting to, I mean, I'm not super into compounds and growing my own food because I'm going to go do other things in life. But, um, there's a lot of people who are buying land and starting back and, going and living in villages again. I mean, I think there's a balance between the
Yeah.
constant stress and compound. Uh, I mean, we've never seen this before. So it's a new path for us to figure out how to, maneuver.
It's it's really lonely as well. And we are incredibly social. And this is the most isolated we have been as people. And we're used to moving around. We're used to being nomads. And then if you look at human history, we kind of settled down because wheat almost domesticated us. So when we started planting wheat, it was when we stayed in one place to grow this thing so that we can get food. And that was when we domesticated wolves and all that stuff. That's 10,000 years ago. But when we kind of look at how we are as people, as I said, with this access to money, this is also the first time that as a global economy, we also are incredibly separate from our communities. We aren't in
Mhm,
community anymore. And when on the podcast this morning, I was talking about the fact that we as people don't know how to behave in communities either. We
mhm,
we jump into a community full of people and we think, oh, there's 200 people in here. I'm just going to drop my little blurb and then go. I'm going to pitch
right.
slap. And that's what happens in a lot of these groups. And that's not how you interact with the community. So it's almost like you have to teach people how to interact in a community again. You have to teach people
Right.
that it's not just about pitch slapping and running. You've got to actually put some work into this stuff. It's the same thing. Like our whole mentality as human beings has completely changed.
Yeah.
And the question is it money? Is it technology? Or is it both? Like what's actually changed us? Because you're right. 100 years ago, if you look at our history with money 100 years ago, it's been completely different.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, it's just a different century. It's just a different era, and we have to figure out how to maneuver through here. And I think it is. I think it is technology. I think it's money. I think it's just that we've developed different habits. I mean, things change every generation, and it's been multiple generations, since that. And I mean, okay, so my grandma taught me to go to work for the next 40 years, find a good job, stay there, and they take care of me. That was her mentality because that's how she grew up. And then somewhere along the lines, I realized that that's just not the world we live in anymore. And so I want to teach people how to be entrepreneurs because that is the future. And don't get me wrong, we still need jobs. We still need people to, do work. But that being said, like, I don't think that people should have to live in poverty with a job. If they're going to go work for somebody else and trade their time for money, they should have a business, or they should have investments, or they should at least have a handle on their finances and know where it's going.
You are absolutely right there. And I think the way that we work as well is going to change. I think it's going to change from this whole, it's either going to do one or two things. It's either we're going to have loads of people who are just all self-employed, and we completely get rid of the scheme where we have loads of employees in one workplace, and everybody just becomes like this whole self-employed aspect. Or we go back in time to how it was 100 years ago or 50 odd years ago, when we were able to have one job. And it was probably, you paid a pittance when you compare it to even inflation rates, but it wasn't much, but you got by kind of thing. And then you had the super, super wealthy where there was no middle class. There's one of two things that are going to happen. It's either that we end up with no middle class and we end up with super poor and super rich, like we had it years ago, or we're going to find where the middle class is going to be absorbed into the working class, and we're all just going to be small businesses everywhere
Mhm.
and companies of one. Because I'm seeing loads of people who are solopreneurs. Like, solopreneurship is a thing now. This agency alone is 10 years old now, and I've been doing this for a lot longer than that, because I've been doing this since I was 16. I'm going to be 36 this year. So yeah, let's tell you how long I've been doing this, and doing this on my own. And God, when I think about how many mistakes I made because I had no financial literacy. I was a science kid.
Mhm.
I wanted to do medicine and I ended up doing entrepreneurship. Like, what? But it's because I said if I couldn't do one, I'm gonna go make money. We're in a transition now. That's why
Mhm.
everything feels really strange and foreign, because we're in a transition period where technology is sped up to a point where we now have AI. And it's like, oh, wait, hold on. This is gonna this is like when we started using machinery for agriculture and we stopped using people,
Mhm.
because that's exactly what's happening in businesses now. We're like, oh, we're going to use technology to replace all of the people that we now have. So there's loads of layoffs happening everywhere. And it's been happening since COVID. There was the whole silent quitting thing that happened a couple of years before COVID, and then still happened after COVID, where people just did not return to work. They realized they didn't want to be stuck in an office all the time, you
Mhm.
know? But yeah, it's just lots. There's so much to unpack here, because it's so much technology, it's so much about society. When we talk about money, we talk about financial literacy, it's all tied into culture and society and geography as well, because it's different everywhere you go. Like, look at the difference between this in the UK with debt culture. It's
Mhm.
completely different. Don't get me wrong, there are people here that will just put themselves in debt for whatever. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist here. It absolutely does. But banks make it harder. Whereas in the States, banks will throw credit cards at you. Like, oh,
Mhm.
do you want another one and another one and another one? Like, they just like throwing it out like it's meaningless, and people rack up huge amounts of debts. And then we then have to pay student loans to go to college and university to get degrees that are no longer applicable for the jobs that we have now. What even is this cycle?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It's
It's
just, but it's so intertwined. Oh, I can't wait to unravel this with you, because I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. Let's just go for it and untwiddle it all. But yeah, it's such an interesting thing, because when you look at it, it's so much in this one thing. You pull one little thread out, and it's like it's got so much in that one thread. Just looking at the
Mhm.
history of
There's a lot of different lanes that we'll go down. I'm excited.
this has been an amazing first chat as well, and I think we're definitely onto something amazing here. I think I absolutely love your idea about kind of taking each week and doing a different topic for each week. So if we're looking at compounding and we're looking at how to build interest, or what's the best way to spend your money, what's the best way to make your money work for you, rich dad, poor dad, and absolutely, definitely, we need to do the history of money because I mean, we talk about this so much in this episode. It almost
Yeah.
feels like the next one needs to like be the history of money. Yeah, but it just because it's so interesting. I mean, the technical term, what I now do is actually neuroeconomics. So it's neuroscience, psychology, and economics. That's technically what I do. I no longer reside in just a vague term of marketing. It is actually neuroeconomics because everything that I do, while I use it for branding and marketing, I look at human psychology, the way people behave. I look at the socioeconomic and socio-political backgrounds as well. It all forms into all of this stuff. So as I said, I look at it from politics, I look at it from geography, I look at it from wherever you are in society, social classes, because there's so much that goes into branding. And it's all of this stuff. And a lot of people and most marketers do not know this, which is
Mm,
why most agencies get this stuff wrong because
mm,
they're not looking in the right place. They're executing these tools, right? But they don't have the context at the very, very beginning, that bit of human behavior. What makes people buy? Why are they making those choices? So really interesting to kind of take a step back as well and kind of look at the history behind money specifically, because that then goes back and looks at the history behind people and what made us change, because that has everything to do with what we do now, because it's
right.
human behavior. It's how our behavior has changed. And it's that human behavior, is it changed because of technology or has it changed because of access to money? That's a
Yeah.
really good question. Yeah. So,
Do you wanna start with that one next time?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. How have we changed as a people in the last 100 years because of technology or money? I think that's a really good start for next week. So, guys, tune in next week because we've got some juicy shit to unpack here. It was
Mm,
amazing having you. Guys, whoever's watching this live, and if you're watching this on the replay, it's lovely to have you here as well. And we will be here every other Thursday. Make sure to RSVP on the Nexus because that is when you'll get updated. We have a lot of stuff happening. We've got a lot of moving parts on Nexus, but if you don't want to miss anything, and you definitely do not want to miss these episodes. So, and if you join us live, you're able to kind of contribute as well. You're able to state how we are going, in these segments as well. So because you can comment in the live chats, which is great. So yeah, I hope to see everybody on the next episode. Hope to see you soon. Take care,
that's
everyone.
great.